Welcome to the Todd Talk Show. I am so excited to bring on Geoff Ryan today. He is probably one of the most important people I ever met. He totally changed my life in my career. I did some work for him and he showed my reel to a producer, which basically got my whole professional life going. Before him, I was like doing wedding videos and tiny little super low budget music videos. And after meeting Geoff, my whole life changed and I got to work on some really, really cool projects. Beyond that, Geoff is an incredibly talented artist. And I say artist because he is so good at so many different things. Everything he touches just seems to turn to gold. He's written and directed 2 feature films that have been really successful. He's been a cinematographer on a lot of commercials and for other feature films. He also created a hand-drawn animated series, and he's also just randomly excellent at design and motion graphics. So without further ado, here is Geoff Ryan.
Hey there, that was a heck of an intro. Thank you. I feel good.
Oh no, dude, no. I am just forever just grateful to you. Just the mentorship you gave me when I was getting started out, like it changed my life. Like, like I was just scrambling, like making these tiny low budget music videos and shooting weddings. Then after you with the introduction to Nick at Matador Productions, and then next thing you know, I'm working for real fashion clients and like have a career, and like what I got paid for a whole project became my day rate. So it was kind of life changing. Like a month of work became what I make in one day.
Exactly. I do remember when I first met you. You were kind of like doing like volume instead of like it was like quantity instead of quality. It's just like how many projects can I cram into 1 month so I can make rent?
Yes, that was basically it. The goal was just like there was no hourly. My hourly wages were probably like $1 per hour. I just worked 100 hours a day.
You did. I mean, even that first one you did with Nick, I remember it was that was one for Vogue, right? It was like Fashion Week, and you were doing like
Style.com. So it was with the
Style.com.
Vogue people, like within Condé Nast.
That's right. You're doing like 24/7 on it, and like they were all asleep, and you're like, "This is just a normal work day."
Well, that was so crazy because we didn't even start shooting until like midnight, and then it had to be delivered by 6 a.m. the next day. It was the wildest thing. Originally, I was brought on just to do motion graphics. Then I ended up shooting, editing, and doing graphics. So it was like totally wild. But it was trial by fire because like, wow, this kid will stay awake for literally an entire week. The week before my wedding. So they're like, okay, like I had like earned like, okay, we can do whatever we want to this guy. Yeah. We'll give him work in the future.
And that's honestly one of the things that obviously the thing that first drew me to you is just like your energy and personality. I mean, you're just a wonderful human being and fun to be around. But also like you were a kindred spirit. You're one of those. I was like, yeah, throw me in the fire. Let's make this happen. And didn't care, like, am I doing sound, am I editing, am I doing motion graphics, like, am I just carrying cases, or am I directing this? I don't know, but just throw me in there, I'll do it. And I love that spirit.
I was so grateful that you just hired me to let me carry around lenses for you, because that was literally my job. My job was basically to entertain Geoff and carry his lenses for him on shoots.
Exactly.
Like, he was basically just bored at these fashion shoots, and I'm like, I want to hire a hyperactive 20-year-old to entertain me with all these fashion people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is true to a certain extent in terms of like on those fashion sets. It's like, I can definitely live in that world, but it's also like it was just nice to have somebody come and just crack jokes with and make sure I didn't lose a lens, because you get in the chaos of shooting and you're like, I switched lenses, I have no idea where I put 35 millimeter. So you were a godsend on that stuff, and just fun to be around. And also, you'd show up at my apartment in the morning ready to like haul out tripods and gear and all this sort of stuff, and you'd already be like at 10. And so just immediately like, okay, I guess here we go. I don't need to wake up. I'm already awake now.
And I get your coffee from that little place downstairs every time.
Yes.
That's giant coffees, because you lived off of coffee and cigarettes on your porch.
Right here.
Well, yeah. I'd love for people, I've just talked about your praises, but I'd love for you to just kind of talk about what you're doing now. And then I want to rewind it back to where you started, because I think you have one of the most interesting like origin stories. So if you want to kind of let people know what you're up to now, I've checked your IMDb and there seems to be a lot going on. So I'd love to
Yeah.
hear kind of what you've been doing the last year.
Yeah, so the last year's been wild for everybody, of course. In the film world, it's been very interesting. And I had a passion project, this film called Blood from Stone that I wrote years ago that was able to get made about, God, would it be now, 2.5 years ago. We shot it, got it edited, and then we're about ready to release it. And of course, the whole world shuts down. Um, and so with the distributors, we're trying to figure things out, and finally ended up just releasing it last October. It went straight to like streaming and stuff like that, and it's gotten great reception, great response, and so it's kind of opened up some possibilities. Now, none of those are concrete right now, so I'm not gonna like get ahead of my skis on that. But there's some great working with some people that honestly, like, there are people that made some of the films that I grew up on and fell in love with. And, it's just nice to have people like that seen my work, respect it now, and want to be part of the next films I do. So
Yeah.
that's just been super exciting. So, I've got my own script that is in early stages of development, and they've got me attached to two others. So,
Wow, dude.
yeah, it's pretty wild. It's I mean, the struggle. You've been around for a lot of it and been a part of it and
Yeah.
been through it. It's wild, and it's like you never feel like you've totally like gotten stable. And like I said, I mean,
Yeah.
it's the indie film market's a weird one right now. So we'll see, like in
Yeah.
terms of over the next weeks, months, or whatever, how they
Mhm.
develop. If I mean, things can always fall apart, but it's feeling really good right now.
That's
So
dude. I'm so excited for you. I mean, like, it's pretty incredible, especially because now we can rewind when not that long
yeah.
ago you had dropped out of art school. And
Hmm.
because part of what this show is, I want to show people it's like success doesn't come overnight. Like, it literally takes
Yeah.
like decades. And just to realize, like, look, you don't just go from nothing to directing multiple feature films. You've directed a lot of commercials, you've shot a lot of commercials, you've done so much stuff within the fashion industry also. Like, anyone who wants to
Yeah.
check out sporkproductions.com, like, Geoff's done some seriously sick projects. And I'm sure you're all Googling into IMDb right now and seeing all the stuff he's working on. So,
Yeah.
but what I'd love to start out with is if you can talk about, so you were in art school and then you dropped out, and then sort of what happened next, and then we can kind of roll through your
Yeah.
story of getting to here.
Totally. Well, yeah. Like, I mean, in high school, I mean, basically, ever since was, a young kid, I was into drawing and stuff like that. And I got into animation, which is where I met Jaren, who I'm sure we'll talk about more later. And, in high school, we started doing some short films. And so it was like really just that was my path. I was doing fine arts. I had a gallery exhibit, and I had a drawing in the Portland Art Museum. I grew up in Oregon.
Wow.
So I had a drawing in the Portland Art Museum by the time I was, 17, had films in like, a couple little festivals. So it was like, that was just my path. Well, of course, my parents are from a much more traditional viewpoint. They're like, you got to go to college. I'm like, it's art. It's not brain surgery. I don't need a 4-year degree to make art. But so that was the compromise. Like, I'd go to art school and stuff like that. And I got there, and it was an awesome experience. I went to school in Vancouver, BC, which is a phenomenal city. Met some just wonderful human beings. It was a great experience being around other artists as opposed to like small town life. But the the program, it's like I loved the life there. The schooling was, I felt like I was in a remedial school, in
Mhm.
terms of like, you're learning color theory, you're learning, and there was some interesting stuff. I had a couple really good teachers that were fascinating in their own right, but the actual like learning process, I'm like, this is just going to be like, what am I going to get out of this other than debt, a lot of debt. And like, if I'm going to put myself into debt, I'll do that making a movie. And so I dropped out after the first year, and kind of drifted for about a year, working some really odd jobs with some very fascinating human beings. And and then my buddy Jaron, who we'd met in the animation class and been to high school and done short films together. He was in New York going to school of visual arts, needed a roommate. I'm like, what the hell? What am I doing? I was planning to move
Yeah.
to LA and doing that. I was like, I'll go to New York. That sounds fun. Never been. So hopped on a plane, moved to New York. I started like PAing on student films, stuff like that. I was, total club kid because I'm coming from small town world, and all of a sudden I'm in New York City. So of course I started hitting the clubs, and that's how I landed my first music video. Was at a
Yeah.
nightclub. I was at a rave at like 5 in the morning talking to some DJ, and he's like, "Oh, I'm a musician. Oh, I'm a filmmaker. I haven't done anything." Um, and he ended up, I did a music video for him, and
Well, you can
I
say the
did.
name of the band. What it was? It was a pretty big punk band at the time, right?
Oh, this was actually the one right before that. Still
Oh,
a big
before
band. They
that.
were called IO, double
Yeah.
IO, and they were like a Eurodance group, and their single before that had been the number one dance single of the prior year.
Oh,
So this is like
wow.
their follow up single. So like it literally went from us talking out in the clubs. Like I meet him at his
Yeah.
apartment. He has an entire half of a floor overlooking
Yeah.
like Central Park
Oh
on
my
57th
God.
Street. Like the nicest sound studio I'd ever been in my life was in the middle
Yeah.
of his home. It was
Yeah.
insane. And I find out like, oh yeah, this is a follow up to a number one hit.
Oh my God.
Um, and so we
And what
had,
experience had you had before this? Because that moved really quickly. So
oh yeah,
you dropped out of art school. Now you're in New York, and now you're about to direct a music video for someone who's
yeah, like
famous.
like literally the only professional thing I had done before that
Yeah.
was now there's a lot of backstory to this, but I'll just summarize. um, I I ended up art directing a Yellow Pages ad for an escort agency in Midtown Manhattan.
That was your prior experience.
That was my first like professional, like I got hired to create something for like a legit client. And it was a full page ad in the Yellow Pages, and I'm not exaggerating, it was the best escort ad in the Yellow Pages that year.
Wow. I mean, the
Um,
bar is high for the Yellow
oh, very
Pages.
high. I mean, not to blackmail him, but Jaron shot it, so it looked gorgeous. It started on it was like medium format, beautifully lit. Used a friend's restaurant to shoot in. We hired a model for it. She was amazing. I mean, it was like a legit shoot. We did it for real.
It was truly like two art students got to make an escort ad, basically.
Oh yeah, they gave us like $600 like for our budget. We're like, holy shit, we're in the big time. Like we
That's
can pay a
amazing.
model like $150, and then we can we each make 150 with like 150 expenses. Like holy crap, like we're in the big
So in the
time.
club, did you basically just show the Yellow Pages ad and be like, "Look, I'm ready to direct this," or how did you have films to show him, or how did he
So
just pick you?
fortunately, the thing I had in that, I mean, not only just a great friend, he's always been a great asset, is Jaron had been going to film school and he'd been shooting student films,
Yeah,
but they were Jaron films. They looked phenomenal. I
yeah,
mean, he would scoff at him now, and he's obviously gotten a little better.
yeah,
But he had some phenomenal stuff he had done,
yeah.
and so between the ideas I had
Hmm.
and his reel, this is
Hmm.
like the two of us together. The guy's like,
Yeah.
sure. And before that, the artist had been on Universal Records, and they'd
Hmm.
actually left. They just weren't happy there, and so they weren't happy with the people that did their first music video, stuff like that. So they wanted to, and we just got along really well at the time, and so that's how that one ended up happening. It was kind of just it was nice. He sort of took a leap of faith on us,
Yeah.
but it worked out. We got it, and literally we had from that meeting in his apartment. I had 9 days to get it to Australia for broadcast on MTV,
Wow. Wow.
and
So you meet him and you're like, you have 9 days.
yeah,
You grew up with Jaredon, right?
yeah, yeah.
So perfect. So you
So
team up with your childhood friend who's a
yeah,
cinematographer and you're gonna direct. So had you
yep.
shown him like his reel or like he's just faith
Yeah,
on you
he's
for meeting
seen
you in a club?
he saw a couple like when we met up, he just wanted to get some ideas and stuff like that. So like
Yeah.
literally I hear the song for the first time.
Yeah.
I'm already like my jaw's on the floor because I'm just like
Yeah.
walking around the nicest apartment.
Yeah.
Still to this day, really. Like in terms of New York apartments, I don't think I've been in one
Yeah.
that tops it. And I've been in some nice
Yeah.
ones now, but not like that. And it's just a phenomenal place. I was dumbfounded by his studio, all that sort of stuff. So we're in there, we're just discussing it, throwing out ideas. I was like, let me just take this, like chew on it for a day. I'll get back to you with
Yeah.
my ideas. And so the next day, meeting at his place.
Yeah.
Um, and he ended up like saying, yeah, let's go for it.
Wow.
Basically like, put the money in the account. Sport Productions first like legit project.
And I'm guessing it was more than
And
$600.
yeah, yeah. And it wasn't like it wasn't like big time, like,
Yeah.
wasn't, what you'd expect for a music video with like a
Hmm.
number one selling artist, but
Yeah.
they had just left Universal. This was coming out of pocket. Now,
Mm,
granted, dude was doing fine, but
yeah.
he's a smart businessman. He's not like me. He
Yeah.
won't just throw his whole life savings into a project because he's, into it. Um, and so, yeah. So, anyways, we do that, and it was, what was the budget? 15K, so $15,000. Which, as somebody, I'm sure you'd have loved that on one of your first music videos,
Oh
or
yeah,
one of your
mine were
first.
$500 music
Yeah,
videos to shoot, edit, produce, do effects, everything.
exactly. And so, we're doing this one, and I hadn't done anything legit, and so I've been
Yeah.
PAing on some of Jaren's
Yeah.
shoots. We literally,
Hmm.
all these dudes I've been like the camera PA for, all of a sudden I'm like
Hmm.
hiring them as the crew, which was
Wow.
fun. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
wild. Like they went from
The
like,
tables have turned.
yeah, like Geoff, don't touch that, just get the case for me, to like, oh shit, I have to answer to you now. But no, it was actually fun. It was really cool. It was and honestly, it's kind of part of what led to, how I am on set. Like I try
Yeah.
to be like just friendly and supportive of everybody, because like I was that
Yeah.
PA for a long
Yeah.
time. I was that guy that was just like, disposable and like just get
Yeah.
that, do that, whatever. So that kind of was a big part of it, seeing that flip to like, how just how things can change so quickly. I mean, not that I do it for selfish reasons, but there is that
Yeah.
sense you never know who that person is going to be or that
Yeah.
person's going to be
Yeah.
tomorrow.
That's
So,
super true in the film business. So be
yeah.
nice on your way up, so they'll be
Yes.
nice to you. And you're like, people don't realize, like, you literally someone who's a PA today may be executive producer
Oh,
in
yeah.
literally a month.
Well, you remember Miles at
Yeah.
Matador, right?
Yeah.
Miles was doing like what you were doing. He was doing that
Yeah.
before. He was like carrying my lenses, and he was a
Yeah.
production PA. And then he ended up at Matador, and he emailed me one day. He's like, "Could you send us a reel?" And next thing I know, I'm directing a national TV commercial with them. And so Miles was my connection to them, and like he had literally been a PA before that.
Oh, on the music videos and stuff you were working on?
No, huh?
Oh, okay.
Nautica. He
Oh,
was a
okay.
production assistant for Nautica
Oh,
for a couple of
okay.
years, and so.
Okay.
Yeah, and he would come on like when we do the Ocean to Ocean series or whatever.
Yeah.
He was on a few of those. Like he was my assistant camera on those,
Yeah.
and on the big like commercial shoots, he was a PA, like Gina's right hand person. And yeah, then he went to Matador, and all of a sudden, next thing I know, like he
He's
emails me, and I'm
hiring
like,
you.
yeah, I'm like directing my first like national spot. So yeah, it's a
So we're
wild
at the music
industry.
video. So
Yes,
we're
at the
at the
music
music
video.
video. And then, so you do this first music video. Is it a hit? Does your
Yeah.
career take off after that? Or what kind of happens next once you create this first music video?
Jared and I still joke about it because like we were just like walking on, like we were floating. We were like, oh my god,
Yeah.
like this is like a huge band. It's gonna be on MTV. Like this is our big break.
Yeah.
So we do this thing. Like I didn't sleep for a week straight. I won't even like bore you with the story, but I literally like the
Yeah.
last day of filming, I forgot where I was and what I was doing. I hadn't slept
Yeah.
in so long. I'm literally
Yeah.
holding a C scan and I had no idea what it was. I ended up getting into a car wreck later. Like I was
Oh my
wrecked after
God.
this thing.
Whoa.
'Cause, that was also, we were shooting on film. So like we
Oh
had
my
9 days
God.
before it had to be on MTV. Well, we're shooting on
It's
film.
get
So that means you have to
processed.
get processed, transferred, edited.
Oh
And
my
this was like, you could,
God.
this was long enough ago. You couldn't email a broadcast quality video file to Australia. We had to
Oh my
ship it to
God. You just
Australia.
ship it.
So we had 5 days to shoot this thing before to give
Oh
us
my
enough time to do the
God.
rest of it. Hire everybody, find locations, lock in
Yeah.
the house
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
stuff. A friend of mine, Juhi, was the producer on it, and she was awesome and like, did some great stuff on it. But yeah, it was like the three of us just together, like just cramming to make it happen. Jaron getting all the technical, me working with like hiring people and trying to get locations,
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff, just make sure I even know what the hell I'm doing. And yeah, it was a shit show, but the edit turned out well. The music video, because it was like Eurodance or like
Yeah.
electronica back in that era, like rock was still king in the
Mhm.
US.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so there, like I mean, other than like electronica bands like say Chemical Brothers or Underworld or
Yeah.
something like that, you had bands like that. But in terms of like the dance club music, like
Mhm.
the boots and pants and like just
Mhm.
that throbbing like dance music, that was
Mhm.
still pretty much relegated to like the gay clubs and Europe
Yeah.
at the time. And so There wasn't a market for it here, but it did really well. It was actually the number one played music video on MTV in the UK that year.
Oh, awesome.
It was huge in like, Asia. It did well in Germany. It was a big, big deal over there. Here, nobody noticed it. And
Yeah.
so it didn't do shit for me here. Um,
Oh.
because I'm
Oh
not over
no.
there. Nobody knew this thing existed here. And so, this was like, nowadays with like a YouTube or something like
Yeah.
that, it would have blown up on YouTube and people would have noticed it.
What
Back
year
then,
is this?
this was 2003.
2003. So this is pre.
Yeah,
You could barely get a video online.
exactly. Yeah. So there
Okay.
was like, it was from all the numbers they were giving us, it was doing
Yeah.
phenomenal overseas, and it was
That's
a
great.
huge hit for them as artists.
Yeah.
And Jared and I got evicted like 6 months later from our
Oh
apartment in
my
Bushwick.
God.
Like,
Jesus. That must have been so hard because you probably like, okay, I've made it. And you've always seen the trajectory. It's like usually someone does a music video. From
oh
that, they
yeah,
get picked up to commercials. Then they get to do features. And
yeah,
usually when you read the compressed timeline of a director's Wikipedia page, it seems like this all happens in six,
oh
in six
totally,
months.
oh
When in
yeah, oh
reality,
no. There was another total like face plant right after this. So that's when I did the
yeah.
punk rock one, the one for
Yeah.
Census Fail.
Yeah.
So I've been
Census
doing
fail.
like some concert videos for them, and
Yeah.
my buddy Jeremy had been talking to him about doing a music video, and it was their first one. They were still unknown at the time, relatively. I mean, they'd done like I forget, they did some like tour or whatever, but they
Mhm.
hadn't blown up. They were still on a smaller label.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so ended up talking to them. They were really into like having me do it. They loved the success of that past one. It was definitely a
Mhm.
hard sell to the label because
Mhm.
I went from doing a Eurodance one to now like
You're doing
doing
punk.
angry punk
Census
rock.
fail. Yeah.
Yeah, songs called Bloody Romance, and it's about a suicidal guy and stuff like that. And the last one's like all pink and poppy, and but I mean, it had been on MTV, so and that was bigger than any of their artists had done. So
Yeah.
that was like they were really pushing for me, and we did that one. It turned out great. It actually
Yeah.
hit, MTV2. I remember a friend of mine called me up. He's like, I just saw your video, and now it's showing Marilyn Manson, and so it was just cool. It was like playing like with all these like
Yeah.
other like really iconic, hardcore and
Yeah.
whatever metal bands and stuff like that. It blew up. They signed to Geffen, and they were like a huge, huge band
Yeah.
for a while after that. And the fun part, and now my name would be on it, but
Yeah.
it's a long backstory, but
Yeah.
I heard, I actually didn't see it, but I had a couple people that watched regularly that told me
Yeah.
like whenever he did a video, he would say his mom directed it,
What?
which is, yeah. And like I have the slate, like my name's on the slate. I've in the film, like I still have like some of the raw footage from that shoot. Like
Yeah.
my name's on there. Jaren's the DP. It's a sport production.
Yeah.
But he kept on saying his mom did it. His next music video, Jaren shot it, but his mom directed it. It was so bad the label never broadcast it, so that video never aired.
That's so crazy
Yeah,
and that's so messed up. And like that, this
oh,
was a big
totally.
reason I like the issue of music videos is it's sort of like whenever you're serving another artist, they always put themselves first,
Yeah,
and it's all about them, and you'll always be super secondary to their vision.
exactly.
And if it comes out bad, it's your fault. And if it comes out great, they directed it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, so that one like was doing great. They
Yeah.
were on Geffen Records and all of
Yeah.
that, and you know, Jaren at the time was like sleeping on sofas, and I
Yeah.
was living in an 8 by 8 foot, bedroom that I was
Mhm.
renting out of some other person's apartment,
Yeah.
and we were trying to figure out how we were going to survive. And
Yeah.
so it was wild, and that was honestly like I still enjoyed doing music videos. But I didn't do many
Yeah.
after that. I
Yeah.
did one more that was like for some friends. I did that one that
Yeah.
you helped out on in Puerto
Yeah.
Rico many years later.
Yeah.
And other than that, it was just like exactly what you said. Is like why am I busting my balls and also, not getting paid much?
No.
Because I hadn't broken through. So like even like the Sense Film
Yeah.
one is their first one. After that, they
Yeah.
had massive budgets.
Yeah.
But that one
And
we
they
had
didn't
30.
hire you anymore because that's how it always
Nope.
goes once they break.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and well, yeah, exactly. I mean, they hired Jaren on the next one, which is cool.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, like I said, his mom directed it, so I'm not as good as his mom. She had done Guiding Light, I think, before that. She directed one episode of Guiding Light. So, anyways, yeah, so that was fun. And then yeah, honestly, around that time, Juhi is actually the one that introduced me, like one of the designers at Nautica, who brought me to do
Yeah.
some internal videos.
Yeah.
And so I was editing and doing some I mean, this was before I knew After Effects, so the motion
Yeah.
graphics were terrible. But I was doing like some titles and a lot of compositing and overlaying and stuff like that. And then yeah, one of the creative directors, Ray Murray,
Yeah.
asked me if I could shoot some BTS videos for him,
Yeah.
behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes,
And
not the Korean pop band.
yeah, not the Korean pop band. I know. Yeah, you can't hashtag BTS anymore. They get buried in Korean pop. Um, And so yeah, I ended up doing like a BTS video for them, and I literally had to have a buddy show me how to use the video camera that we were shooting on because
Yeah.
I had Jaren around. I didn't have to shoot anything.
So you were never
Uh,
really shooting things.
no, no, I very
Oh,
rarely
that's
shot.
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, why would
So
I
were
when
you
I
just
had let?
were you just focusing on post then, or just being a
I
director
mean,
without shooting?
my dream was to be a director. I hadn't really edited. I mean, I had done some editing just for my own little projects or whatever.
Hmm.
But even like those first two music videos, an old friend, this guy Jed, edited those. I didn't
Hmm.
even edit those.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't until my third music video, and it was like so low budget, I didn't even want to bother
Yeah.
Jed. That I was like, well, I know the basics of editing, so I did
Yeah.
that one, and I was happy with how it turned out. That one, it was for like a really hardcore metal band, but it ended
Yeah.
up they'd never had anything on TV, and it showed on was it
Yeah.
Much Music in Canada, and it showed on
Yeah.
a couple of music channels throughout Europe and stuff. So it was like kind of their biggest
Yeah. The big
music
hit.
video hit. So it was like, okay, I guess I know how to edit. So I started editing more, and then I got like the
Yeah.
Nautica stuff, and I got more stuff from
Yeah.
that. And then yeah, I did this behind the scenes video, and it was just supposed to, the typical thing like back then, especially before like social media was a big deal. Behind the
Hmm.
scenes were usually just to show corporate, like here's what the new ad
Mm,
campaign sort of how it's coming about. This is meant for an
yeah.
internal video. They
Yeah.
liked it enough. They ended up putting it up in like their stores and Macy's, stuff
Oh,
like that. And it just became a
wow.
regular shooting there
Yeah.
behind the scenes, which then it evolved from being, the BTS guy. They're like, oh, we're doing like legit, like this is now like we have like the
Yeah.
photo here and the video here. And then it
Yeah.
became like, oh, we're just doing like a video shoot
Video.
to doing like commercials. And then, like I said, then landing other fashion clients. And
Yeah.
the rest is history on that one in terms of how I went from not knowing anything about the fashion industry to being like
Yeah.
doing Macy's and the former
Yeah.
Lord and Taylor and all that sort of stuff.
So basically with Nautica, you got in the door doing behind the scenes videos, and then very quickly you sort of leverage that. Well, that really blows my mind because you're such a strong cinematographer, and I feel like that's one of the things you're kind of known for, and you got
Yeah.
so much work as a cinematographer.
Oh, it's
That's
totally
super
messed
surprising.
up. I literally I didn't call myself a cinematographer for years, even though I was getting paid to do it. I'm shooting commercials, but like I said, I mean, like in my mind, Jaren is a cinematographer. Like Jaren is like
Can
that's
you
what
just
he
explain to
does.
everyone who
Oh, yeah, I'm
Darren
sorry,
is really quick? Like
So
I know who he is, but like
yeah,
he's actually. So you need to
I
explain
mean,
this.
as you can tell just from me talking, and Todd knows
Yeah.
him, but like he's like Jaren's been literally like best friend since childhood, but he's also the
Yeah.
cinematographer that did The Witch and The Lighthouse, and has a new one coming out that's going to be insane, and like Academy Award nominee cinematographer now. And he's always been phenomenally talented. He's obviously gotten better
Yeah.
over the years, but he's always
Yeah.
like even back in high school, like the stuff his photography back then is just spectacular. And so he's just a phenomenal talent. So to me, that was a cinematographer.
Yeah.
I'm a dumbass with a camera, you know. Um, but literally, I was making a living at it before he
Yeah.
was. And so, in fact, all my cinematographer friends, I was financially doing better than all of them were, and I didn't even call myself a cinematographer. But I was fortunate. I mean, I literally like my film school for that was
Mhm.
working with journalist years, learning like
Yeah.
his theory on it,
Mhm.
his visual language, and just siphoning off some of that. And then honestly, like being on those fashion shoots, you're working with some of the top photographers in the world, fashion photographers, And so looking at the way they worked with models, looking at the way they light, the way they compose a scene, especially with like Nautica being these gorgeous locations, often very remote. How do they, you can't bring a whole grip truck up there. So how are you lighting and sculpting the light with very minimal gear? Oftentimes it's like one dude with a bounce board and maybe you've got some Duvetine, and they would just create these phenomenal images. And so really like learning from really some of the greats. I mean, at the time he wasn't known as it, but I knew he was going to be. Like Jaron is one of the greats, and I got to learn from him, and I got to learn from some phenomenal fashion photographers as well, which was also stylistically was good because Jaron has a very distinct style, and he and I like creatively. That's like great friends, but creatively, like we would clash sometimes because I love color and I love sparkle and I love stuff like that. And he's like one color, one tone, very controlled and sculpted and stuff like that. And I like stuff a little bit more wild and crazy. Um, so that was great to be able to do the fashion and really see like, oh, that's how you do like a really pop, an image that just pops and like just commands like, your attention, even in a whole wall of magazines. Like that's the one I want to look at. Seeing how they did that, how they created those images and found those moments and stuff. It was a great, that was my film school was working with under people like that or alongside Jaron or however you want to call it. But honestly, like he was like a crutch for me in a lot of ways. I didn't have to worry about the aesthetics because I knew he would nail it. And then it was one of those things like, you just knew at some point he was going to blow up. And so I, with shooting all that, I started like wanting to like shoot more of my own stuff. Thus like the music video you and I did and a number of other projects where it's like, I knew I wasn't there yet as a cinematographer, but I needed to get there. And so like, how do I learn my own visual language and really develop that? And so kind of forced myself into it, which worked out great because not to jump about 12 years, but when I was set, Jaron shot Frey, my first feature film, and that's, looks phenomenal. And he did an incredible job on that one, especially considering what we had to work with. I mean, I had a budget of like 35 cents. And so, to be able to, have that, but then right after that is when he did The Witch and his career sort of took off. And then like, when I was shooting Blood from Stone, he was doing The Lighthouse. Obviously, I'm not going to be like, oh, why aren't you shooting my movie? It's like, no, dude, you're doing a future Oscar nominated film. Like, go do that. I'm going to do my film. And so that's why I directed and DP'd, that film. But I fortunately laid that groundwork to where I didn't like, I didn't totally fall on my face when I was shooting that. I actually, according to what other people say, it seems like it turned out well. So
it turned out great. So what blows my mind about that is to absolutely everyone else on the outside, like you are a super successful cinematographer. You are shooting national spots for people like Macy's, and in New York, you are known as a really good cinematographer.
Yeah.
And like, I'd literally come bring him something. Like I'd bring him a hard drive and he'd be like on the set of Vogue shooting something. And then it's just crazy that even when you're at that high level of success in your own mind, it's like you still have that imposter syndrome. Like I'm not a cinematographer, which blows my mind. Do you want to kind of tell people like, so you've done the music videos, maybe just give a little spiel about what it was like working in the fashion industry and sort of what you did there and sort of what that universe is like, which you have a ton of experience with?
Yeah. Yeah, the fashion industry, honestly, like I really grew to love it. I mean, I was always into like clothes and stuff like that. I followed like, I was a fan of certain designers, but to really get into it and see like the creative process and, I really enjoyed it. And obviously for shooting, especially back when I first started, like, but some of the budgets were really strong and stuff like that. And so like shooting in just phenomenal locations. I got to see so much of the world thanks to like some of those shoots. So that was great too. But the beauty of it is it kind of felt like as much as I enjoyed the creative side of music videos, obviously the business side I wasn't a fan of. It was like the fashion stuff was almost like a nice middle ground where like you're doing stuff that's like really it's all about the imagery. It's not like you're not having to worry about specifically selling this product or that product. It's like just make it look great and sell the brand. And so that was really cool. I mean, obviously you'd have like whatever that season's clothes were or whatever. but working with these creative directors and especially, with some of the brands, I got to be really involved on the creative process. And so it was just awesome. You think like, and thinking, as a cinematographer and as a director, really trying to think of ways that you could really speak to a viewer without being like in your face. It's not like, oh, here's a message, here's a message. It's more of like
Yeah.
giving them something that just makes them feel good. Like, oh, I love, like, this image just feels comforting, or it feels grand, or it feels whatever that you want them to feel and associate with that brand. Um, and I loved really getting into that. And that's where, honestly, like, even like we were talking, you were mentioning earlier with like the motion graphics and all that sort of stuff. Like, I had dabbled in After Effects. I really got into it because, like, we're doing these commercials and stuff like that. And I wanted to really like make them pop, and so I got really into like title, and I'd done graphic design as years before, but like I really got into that on After Effects and learning how to really make the titles look awesome, how to make some of the graphics look cool, how to do some special effects, like doing a holiday ad, and you're always shooting a holiday ad in the middle of summer, and so like how do you make it look like winter? It's like, well, you've got production team that puts out like a bunch of fake snow and stuff like that, and you got a snowblower, but also like the snow's only hitting like right here, it's on this plane, you need it to hit like way deep. And so like doing that in After Effects, or you know being able to like do that sort of photo retouching. There was a David's
Yeah.
bridal shoot we did on the beach, and we show up, and I don't know, like we missed it somehow in pre-pro, that it was like low tide. It's just nothing but
Oh no.
seaweed and tire tracks on the beach. It's gloomy as hell. It just looks miserable out. And it was like, well, this isn't going to work. And we'd rented like a 20-foot crane for this shot. It's going to be this huge jib shot as like the couple in like the wedding dress and the suit like walk down the beach. Doll, the whole jib's going to go up and reveal like this epic like seascape or whatever. And it's just everything's gray and nasty looking. I was like, let's just shoot it. And I had like the AC like fire off a couple plates for me, and I ended up taking all that footage into post. Spent way too long on it in After Effects, but made it into a really cool 5-second shot at the end of the ad. And I literally just rotoscoped out the people, motion tracked the beach, and recreated the entire beach from with a lot of color correction and some plates from stock footage and stuff like that, but made it work. And we ended an entire year of ads with that shot. So um, yeah, so all the fashion stuff just led me to really like, I wanted to be able to always deliver like the best things I could. Oftentimes these fashion brands, like, despite the what you may think, like they don't have huge budgets because they have to put out so much
Mm.
content.
Yeah.
And so they may have a huge ad budget overall, but for the individual ads, it's
Mm.
like they don't have a lot. And so how could I make it look like a really high end ad? How could I make it look like something that you know uh, uh, Gucci or whatever would do, with $1 million. Okay, we have what we have, so how can I do it for there? And it was just fun, and it was just nice because then by the end of it, when I started getting into doing my own films, I could do so much of the post production too. So it was great. Yeah, I love
What
like the fashion experience. Like, sum it all up, it was really good both for me. I mean, financially it was great, but it was also really good as a way to elevate myself as an artist in a lot of
Mhm.
ways while getting paid. So it's like
Yeah.
kind of the best of both worlds.
What's really crazy, I don't know if people got, but you were basically running a whole commercial studio by yourself. Like, you really took
Yeah.
being a one man production company to the highest level of anyone I've ever met. Like, Geoff was literally directing it, shooting it, editing it, doing the graphics for it, doing the visual effects for it, and like color grading it. It was really crazy that you
And don't,
were normally in production, it might have been five people's jobs. It
yeah.
was all you, which I think why your business in New York did so well, because you could just take the whole budget of the commercial was all
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. And don't forget, I used to score them too.
Oh yeah, you did the music too. So it would literally be like everybody but the model on the
Yeah.
screen was by Geoff, and every part of it was you, which was really like, I mean, like people do that at a lower level, but I think that's really rare for people to be able to. You're performing at the highest level in cinematography, directing, editing, motion graphics, color grading, and then you're doing the score too is really crazy. And like I guess that skill set has just served you well, so then you could go on to make features and everything like
Yeah,
that.
it has because that was. I mean, I didn't have any contacts to like
Yeah.
legit money to like for a first feature and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and yeah, I was doing some stuff, but I wasn't. I did Frey before, like the I was doing the big commercials and stuff like that, so I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really have any connections.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just like, okay, I've been doing this stuff for a while, and
Mm-hmm.
it's so easy to fall into that safe path where you're like, I've got a lucrative career. I'm just going to keep
Yeah.
going down this route.
Yeah.
And there was that part of me that's like, yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd never had money before. It was cool.
Yeah.
You know, it was nice not to worry about getting evicted every, year or two. Uh, it's like, oh my God, my credit record's not just a giant red flag.
It doesn't just say no on it.
Exactly. It's like it's not even a number. It's just two letters, N-O.
No.
Yeah. So I mean that part of it was awesome, but it was also there was that sense of like, at the end of the day, in 50 years, is this what I want to be known for? And not that, who knows what I'll be known for. And hell, in 50 years, we may be in an apocalyptic hellscape and there is no history left. But,
it's post history.
yes. But, in terms of like, what is the contribution you want to make? What is your
Yeah.
talent really for? Like, I got to just find out. And you were talking earlier about like the imposter syndrome or just the self
Yeah.
doubts. There was also that part of me that, like, as a filmmaker, I wanted to think I was good, and I'd done some short
Yeah.
films I thought were good. But it was also one of those things like we've all known those directors that have an ego up to here, and their talent level is still yet to be found.
Yes.
Um, and so I'm like, maybe I'm that person. Maybe I'm that person who just thinks he's amazing, but he's actually a hack. And there's only one way to find out. I'm going to make a
Yeah.
film.
Yeah.
And so that's when I made Frey, and I literally just saved up for a while and just self-financed it basically.
Yeah.
Pulling a ton of favors. Jaron worked for free, Jody worked for free, Brian and Marissa, the two lead actors, I mean, basically everybody worked for free on it.
Mhm.
Fortunately, because of the subject matter, you could also justify it a little bit that way because it was about a returning combat vet. This was like, like end of the Bush era into the Obama era when the wars were like raging at the time, stuff like that. So people were still like, not that they are now, but they were really much more focused or at least cared about veteran issues. And so could also, there was that aspect to it that, motivated people to really want to make this succeed. Um, but yeah, we ended up pulling that one off, and I couldn't have done, on that one. I mean, Jaron DP'd it, but I was the director sound man because,
Yeah.
Why not? We didn't have a budget for a good sound person, and it's like, well, if we're only gonna have a mediocre sound person, I can do that.
If you need to be medium, I can do that. What I love
Yeah,
is what you decided is you didn't wait for someone to pick you. Like you weren't going to wait around and like who's going to fund my first feature, who's going to do this.
yeah,
You waited. You just decided like I'm going to make this feature happen. And like
totally.
like so beyond that you wrote a script and you wrote it to the town you grew up in, right? Basically.
Not the town I grew up in, but nearby. I wrote it because I grew up in
Mm-hmm.
Central Oregon, but I wrote it to take place in the coastal mountains
Oh,
of
okay.
Oregon. But part of that was ever since I was a kid, like I just thought that was the most beautiful places ever.
Yeah.
It's incredibly gorgeous, and it's got these little pockets of just these incredibly depressed towns, like just like, and you know me, so obviously I loved it.
That's everything you love. A sad
It
town full of
is.
sad people is right up your
It's
alley.
exactly, and so you just drive through these towns. It's just sadness. And you're like, oh, this is the perfect spot for this film, and also like the theme of it. It's I use like the whole lumber industry as a metaphor for our
Yeah.
wars. So you have these huge forests, these tall trees, and then he works at a lumber mill. So you see these trees just being cut up and ground up, and he's sweeping up the shards of these trees. And so it was just in all those ways it worked. And it also had the benefit of, yeah, I had family nearby, I had old friends nearby. So, Was able to pull a few favors that way too. And also, it's not a huge film market there, so people are a lot more giving. Like you try to make a
Excited.
film in New York or LA, nobody gives a shit. Like get out of my way. Um, if you want to use a space, they're like, yeah, it's going to cost you 100 grand a day. And you're like, oh, I don't have that. Whereas in Oregon, most people were really happy to let us just shoot for free. We shot in the wood mill for free for a couple of days.
Yeah.
The most expensive location was his apartment, which was
Oh,
wild. We were
really?
next to a raging meth addict next door. And that was the most expensive location because they charged us a month of rent for the place.
What was a month of rent in burned out Oregon? Like
I mean,
$400?
it was actually, I think it was like $500 or $600, yeah, something like that, which was wild. I think we got ripped off, but
And they thought they were getting the greatest deal
oh,
ever.
totally. And it was great. The neighbor, like like one of the nights we were shooting, she was totally tweaking out and like banging on the
Yeah.
walls and stuff like that. Scene where Brian's like having his like freak out and you hear the banging on the
Yeah.
wall. That was actually her banging on the wall, and then he hit back and just turned into like a pounding on the wall fest that I chopped out. Um, and like she was like pacing around the building all
Yeah.
night. She'd like get in her car and drive back and forth, just like looking at us, all sort of stuff. The
Oh
next
my
day,
God.
we show up. Brian, we're having lunch across the street. Brian's in the
Yeah.
apartment, and she's outside on the patio, and she's like, "Oh, are you my new neighbor?" And he's like, "No, we're shooting a film here." He's like, "Oh, you're doing a movie here?" He's like, "Yeah, we were here last night. Don't you remember?" She's like, "Nah, I don't remember that at all. I was just sound asleep." Oh my god. Yeah, so that was like the type of building we were in. It was just, I mean, and you see it
Yeah.
in the film. It's barely standing, and that was the most expensive location. But yeah,
So- Dude, that's amazing. And then so
yeah,
you make this film, and it's about a war veteran coming back from
yeah.
Iraq with post traumatic stress in depressed Oregon. And I watched it. I was actually at the premiere. That's where we really
That's
met.
right.
Was
You
I was
were.
filling in. Yeah, this basically we met was the night of your
That's
premiere for
right.
me to do behind the scenes. It was my first job I did for you was to shoot the behind the scenes of your
That's
movie.
right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then, so this is where I meet you, and you've created Frey, and you did it all yourself. You have to premiere in Brooklyn, and then it actually got great reception. So I'd love for you to
Yeah.
talk about what it's like. You produce your own independent feature, and then sort of what happens next when you, with no connections, you make this movie, and now you're putting it out in the world.
Yeah. And I mean, as you described it, it's about a returning vet in a depressed town. It's box office poison. So I was expecting this film to get watched by like 5 people on YouTube and get 4 downvotes. Um, and so, but obviously, a lot of people put their heart and soul into it, and I'm like, well, I made it. Let me put it out there in the world and see what happens. So we submitted it to like 60 festivals in the U.S. It got rejected from 57 of them. The 3 we got into, we won Best Film. So it was wild.
Wow.
It's like, you either won or got rejected. In Europe, we did a little bit more like, normal. We got into a handful of we got a Best Film at one festival in the UK. Otherwise, we were just, official selection, which is great.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so through that, it started getting some attention just because, like, what's this little film that's winning these awards?
Yeah.
Um, and it was funny. Like we would joke, like Brian and I would show up these festivals, and you'd have, we didn't have any money. Like we didn't have like a publicist or anything like
Mhm.
that. And we did, but she wasn't getting it very far. And so like we didn't have like an entourage with us, and
Yeah.
it was a small movie. Like literally, it was made by a handful of people. So we'd show up at these festivals. It'd be like 2 or 3 of us at these things, and you do like the red carpet thing, and like all these like posses of people would do the red carpet, cameras and flashes going off everywhere. And
Yeah.
it's this whole thing. And like Brian and Jared and I would walk onto a red carpet, and it would just go silent. You'd hear like click, next, like we walk off. Like nobody gave a shit that we were there. We were just like the least interesting group because it's just like a couple of dudes that made this film. Like people were like, what the hell is that thing going to be about? And then we'd win like the top prize, and all of a sudden, like, oh
Yeah.
wait, those guys. So it was wild. It was like all of a sudden, like people were paying attention, starting to get press on it. We got a write up in Hollywood Reporter, things like that. And so yeah, it ended up getting had a couple different distributors that were interested in it.
Mhm.
And honestly, there was only one I felt good about because I still knew, despite the awards and all of that, it's a small film. It's
Mhm.
not, it's not an A24 movie. It's not, it's not. It has nobody famous in it,
Mhm.
stuff like that. So some of these other ones would like hype it up a lot, and I would just feel like I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna be, and they were legit distributors, but I just felt like I was gonna be like the smallest film on their roster, and they weren't gonna really
Mm.
push it.
Yeah.
And so that's when Indie Rights had they
Mhm.
had reached out to me, and we had a sales agent on the film, and she
Yeah.
honestly didn't want anything to do with them. She's like, I've never even heard of them. But I talked to Linda from Indie Rights, and she's just very real, very honest. Was like, I love the
Yeah.
film, I believe in it, but I also can't make any promises because it is a
Yeah.
depressing film. It's like 90 minutes of sadness. Uh, so
That should have been the title, 90 minutes of
yes.
sadness.
Yes, exactly. It's just it's a montage of sadness, really. And so yes, I was like, I got a good vibe from Linda, and
Mhm.
they were a smaller distributor, but they were really
Mhm.
tapped into the streaming market. They've been in it for a while,
Mm.
and I was just like, you know what? I'd rather be a big film with a small distributor than a small film with a
Mhm.
big distributor. So I went with
Mm.
them,
That's true.
and they crushed it. They did so
Yeah.
good with it.
Mhm.
It did so much better than I ever expected it to. I mean, we made the
Yeah.
budget back numerous times over,
That's
which was
great.
nice. Yeah.
Which is
I
rare
mean,
for an indie movie.
oh yeah, especially yeah. I mean, this one we had no marketing budget.
Yeah.
Whatever I could throw into Google Ads or whatever was our marketing budget. And so yeah, it was great just on that level. And the audience reception was just phenomenal for it.
Yeah.
So much. And one of the things that hit me the hardest about it, and I started to pick up on this during the festival circuit, but really once it came out, it was just like hammered home. I
Yeah.
had made the film, it's about a returning combat vet. I made it for
Yeah.
people like me who were clueless.
Mhm.
Like when my cousin came
Yeah.
back from Iraq and was hearing
Yeah.
about his experience, his buddies' experiences back home, I was dumbfounded. I was like, "Oh shit! I thought we took care of our vets. I didn't realize like
No.
how dire, yeah, how just they were just like, oh, there you go, you're on your own. Thanks for fighting for us, and sorry about the injuries. Now get out there and live your life." I had no idea, and so I wanted to make this film for idiots like me who had no clue that was the situation. I figured these guys have lived it; like they don't need to watch a movie
Yeah.
about it. What I was shocked by was how much it meant to actual veterans who would see
Yeah.
it, and like one of them said, he's like, I realized if some filmmaker is telling my story so accurately, that means it's not just me. I'm not alone. There's other
Mm.
people like me out there who are living this, because he's obviously heard these stories, he's seen it, and so he's like, it's for the first time since I've been back, I don't feel alone. And so many of them sharing that, or how it made them like reach out to one of their buddies who they hadn't talked to in a while just to say hi, because they're like, you never know when it could be that day when they just needed to hear from somebody.
Yeah.
And so that was the beauty of that one in
Mhm.
terms of the impact of the film, which kind of little felt flashback, but like that first film I did in high school, I
Mhm.
still have it somewhere in one of my drawers. But I have a letter that somebody wrote to me. I did a film about censorship, and
Yeah.
and I had a letter that somebody wrote to me that was basically they'd been at a screening of it, this short film, and they said it changed their views on censorship. That
Oh
they
wow.
yeah, it was. And I was like, at the time I was 17, and I was just like, holy crap! Like I actually made a film that changed somebody's mind. Like you always hear about the power of art, but you're like, what can it really do? And so it took a long time, but then flash back to Frey now, and it's like to see that I was able to make something again
Mhm.
that obviously I have the skills to make some. I knew I had the skills to make something good. I was getting paid to do commercials.
Yeah.
But to be able to do something that hit people on that visceral emotional level, and to get, I mean, there was a letter I got not that long ago. This guy who emailed and said, I haven't seen your film in 4 years, but I still think about it every day, and thanked me
Oh
for it.
wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, how can you, like, when you get something like that, you're like, I couldn't do anything else with my life. Like, what
Yeah.
else would I, and so that was the stuff that really motivated me to, like,
Mhm.
as much as I was loving the comfortable life of being a commercial director
Yeah.
and cinematographer, I was like, I got to just really dive into the film side of things, because my landlord doesn't care when I get one of those letters, but
Yeah.
but he just cares if I've been paid that month. But in terms of like for the spirit or the soul or whatever, it's like you gotta, that's the type of stuff you want to be able to do projects like that when you put them out there, you've hit people on a
Yeah.
deep level, and maybe they think about the world or think about someone that they may have looked down
Yeah.
upon or not thought about. They all of a sudden value them and see them in a whole new light. And that's the power of storytelling. So that's what got me like really like that's my focus now.
That
So
makes so much more sense. Like to me, it seemed like the craziest thing in the world. So this is where I know
yeah.
you. In my mind, Geoff is the most successful person I know in my life. He's he's shooting and editing commercials. He has this huge career. He has this baller apartment in
Yeah. I was
Manhattan
I was
that's
living
like
well.
right on St. Mark's. To me, it was just like this is the goal achievement is to get here. And and I've been
Yeah.
assisting you on all these different things, and you tell me, and now I understand a lot more when you see like people like had said things like that. But you tell me I'm going to leave this all behind and I'm gonna go out to LA to try to make movies. And so I would love like that's like I mean, obviously you had these people writing you touching things, but like you had reached a really high pinnacle of success in the commercial industry and doing that. How did you decide like okay, I have this financially successful career, but how did you decide, like, okay, now I'm going to take the leap and leave this all behind to follow my dream? Because, like, to me, that was like so brave that you do that. I was blown away. So I would love to how you come to that decision and how you decided to do that.
I'm glad you said brave as the adjective. I wasn't sure which adjective you're going to use there.
Well, no, you followed your dream. No, but
Yeah.
like it is brave.
Oh,
Like no, it's really easy when you have nothing to lose to continue to do things. But
yeah.
you went in this with a lot to lose because you had a huge career in New York City.
Oh, yeah.
You were a very in demand fashion cinematographer who was doing huge shoots. So it was a big jump to go from I'm leaving New York City, where you're doing super well, to like I'm going to
Yeah.
go out to LA and do that. So I think it is to me it's incredibly brave. Like because I just follow wherever people will give me money. Like so, like I have no choice in this. You'll give me money. You're what I love doing now.
Yes. Yes. That. I mean, if there was a bit of a debate about it, but in all
Yeah.
honesty, it just felt like it was what I had to do. I actually remember, and I can thank Jaren for this one as well. As like I was doing some really cool commercials, like they were, paying well. I was doing well. Getting to do some cool stuff. Um, but they were still like they were very retail commercials. They
Yeah.
weren't like I wasn't getting like the avant-garde commercials or anything like that. It
Mm,
was like I would get the ones like this Friday 50% off, or maybe it'd be like presenting a new line or something like that.
yeah.
But it wasn't like I didn't get to do the really cool commercials.
Yeah.
And so I remember like Jaron was over one night. And this was before the witch, but he was
Mhm.
staying with me for a while. And we were out on that patio and just talking about it. And I was, you know, I mean, I can be a little hyperbolic and melodramatic at
Mhm.
times.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, if I'm still doing TV commercials for polo shirts in 20 years, I'm going to walk into traffic. And, so we're just talking about like, the will to do stuff that artistically was more fulfilling.
Yeah.
And and I just gotten a couple more letters about Frey and stuff like that. And while
Mhm.
Frey was a great like piece in a lot of ways, again, not a smart calling card, because not a lot
Mhm.
of ad agencies like, oh my god, this guy makes the most depressing films, he's got to do our next commercial.
The status.
Yes.
Maybe for Prozac, maybe or antidepressants, you could have gotten
Yeah.
work on you could have done the before half of commercials.
Yeah, I could do that, or like those commercials about the sad dogs in a kennel or something like that. Um, so yeah, so it wasn't like a great calling card for my commercial career. So it was just one of those things, and it was also could go into a lot of reasons, but it was just one of those things where it's like I wanted to do more of that, and Jaron basically just said he's like, if you don't do interesting things, people aren't going to hire you to do interesting things,
Yeah,
and
that's the truth.
so yeah. It really is. It's like, I might believe I can do it, but if I can't show it, why would somebody
Yeah.
hire me to do it?
Yep.
And so that was kind of those things where I started thinking about that. It's like, and he had said something years ago about like, he never really pursued the commercial world. And he's like, it's hard to get into commercials, just like it's
Yeah.
hard to get into movies. So he's like,
Yeah.
if I'm going to put all my energy into one, I'm going to focus on all that energy into movies. Well, so kind of having that talk with him, and that was around the time, like, The Witch had come out. The Witch had
Hmm.
then came out a little bit after that. It was just one of those things where it's like, and as like he had been
Yeah.
struggling for years. I mean, that
Yeah.
dude was like he was living a very rocky life for
Yeah.
a long time before his break started to come. And so I was living comfortably. I have this like
Yeah.
gorgeous apartment in the East Village and stuff like that. And this dude's like couch surfing or, that type of thing. But
He
then like
literally borrowed a camera of mine to
that's
go
right.
shoot a party I didn't want to do, and it's absolutely insane. A guy I let borrow a camera to shoot a party is now he's nominated for an Academy Award, right?
Yep.
Which is
Yeah.
so. Just people
Yeah.
like things can change quickly.
Yeah, dude, shooting $90 million movies right now.
Yeah.
And also that party he shot, by the way, talk about
Yeah.
some unknown heavy hitters in that room. The
Yeah.
DJs that night were the Chainsmokers.
Oh my goodness, that's so
Yes.
crazy. Small world.
So Jaron was shooting, like they were performing in front of like 20 people at a little club in the East Village, and
Oh my
Jaron's
God.
shooting it.
I should have took that job. That was my mistake.
You totally should have.
I totally should have.
So those 20 people at that club didn't realize the royalty they were surrounded by at that time.
Exactly.
But yeah, so there's just a couple of things that were just gonna be thinking that's like, you know what? Like he's right. Like if I wanna make films, like that needs to be my focus. And I've been trying to do the bi-coastal thing, like, I'll go out to LA for a couple of weeks, do some meetings. Well, people in LA are flaky. You'd set up meetings and then like you arrive in LA and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, can we do next week? I'm like, I'm gonna be in New York again next week. So it's just one of those things like if it's gonna happen, I gotta live out there. And it just became, you know what? I didn't get into this industry to get rich. I got into it to make stuff I believed in. So yeah, that's what I went after. And it took a while. I got another film made.
Yeah.
And it was, Frey was an interesting one too, because like it had its first like bump of interest.
Yeah.
And then it kind of like tapered off. Mm-hmm. And then we still don't really know why, other than just like word of mouth. It just started to rise again. And then it had this other like second wave, like 4 years after it had been released.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden it was like one of the most popular films under War and Military on Amazon.
Which is
crazy.
Surreal.
Yeah.
And didn't you start being brought on the right-wing talk shows and stuff like that from that?
The what? I'm sorry, I missed that part.
Didn't you? Oh, sorry. Didn't you start getting brought on to like right-wing talk radio after that? You made this movie. I remember all of a sudden you were on all these crazy right-wing shows, which is not your political belief. If people can't tell by looking at you. So you want to talk about that? Because I just remember that was like the craziest thing you told me.
It was also awesome because I'm on this, like, it's like, the woman's got photos of herself with like Glenn Beck and Denise D'Souza and Laura Ingraham, and like she's like really right-wing radio.
Yeah.
This was pre-Trump, so it wasn't like the Trump type, but it was more like the Tea Party, like super right-wing. Like the people that are like, Fox is a little too liberal for me. And I was on her show, and it was like me and this dude who was like an former like Air Force captain or whatever. So like very, very right-wing like group, and then they're bringing me on, and it was an awesome experience because she'd seen this movie and they're talking about it. Now he's Air Force, so his like idea of like veterans is different because if you're an Air Force veteran, you go to like be a pilot at like Delta or you're working at NASA. Like they don't have, like
you have skills.
Exactly. Like you're leaving the Air Force with like top-notch skills. Whereas like if you're a Marine, like, as one of the Marines told me, he's like, I'm really good at being a sniper. I'm like, that doesn't really, that's not good on a resume. Thus the scene in Frey where he's like interviewing for a job at a Dairy Queen. It's like, what skills do you have? It's like, I mean, none that apply here.
Unless you need people to shoot ice creams out of people's hands.
Exactly. So it was an interesting conversation, but at one point she's talking about how like the movie really made her think about how many people, and I love that she said not just veterans. She's like, there's so many people that fall through the cracks through no fault of their own, but just
Mm,
circumstances and
yeah,
just an unjust system out there, unjust world out there, and how we as a society need to do more to lift them up and give them a way to get back up on their feet. I'm just thinking, like, I have this like ridiculously right wing radio host talking about like social cohesion and like a social safety net that we need to have for these people,
yeah.
and I was just like, that's the power of art. Like literally, somebody who's like wildly left wing as me can make something that, as long as you do it honest, like
Yeah,
you know, as you know, seeing the film, like I didn't make it with an agenda. I'm
yeah,
sure my agenda creeps up here and there.
yeah.
But my idea was I wanted to do a film that, I was against both the Iraq and the Afghanistan war, even having been in New York on 9/11 and
Mhm,
experiencing all that, and like still was against it, and I was horrified by the wars, horrified by what had happened to my own cousin there, by what I was
mhm,
reading about was happening to the Iraqis and people there. So I'm like, how can I do something about it? And it's like, Americans, whether they follow through or not, they speak about caring about the veterans.
mhm,
So if I do a film that is about the consequences of war on our veterans, even those who are pro-war, gung-ho about it, will have to confront the reality of what we do to, what we call our heroes. We call the veterans, our combat veterans, heroes. What are we doing to these heroes? What is the reality of their life when they come back? And so if I can do a film that makes somebody who's super pro-war, gung-ho, let's bomb them all and turn it into a parking lot, which is a term I'd heard numerous times.
Oh my god.
Yeah. As you know, I like to do my research. So I like to like hear just like vast spectrums of and the amount of times I heard that phrase used was amazing. But yeah, so that was my idea, was I wanted to make a film that really hit people who were pro-war and made them confront the reality of it, but in an honest way, not preaching at them, not doing it like a Michael Moore sort of style, but like, here's the truth of it. And then to be on those right-wing radio shows,
Yeah.
that was like the most notable one, but like I was on a number of them, and yeah, just to be on those, and
And what was the name of the woman's show you were on?
oh god, I should remember. Doris.
Oh, it's fine if you don't. But it was someone super kid. Was it? I thought you were on like the Glenn Beck of South Dakota or something, or South Dakota. Like you were always
It was
telling me they had
on
these
this.
crazy themes.
Yeah, no, it was on the same network or whatever as him, but I can't
Okay.
remember. And she ended up like retiring a couple years after that.
Oh, okay. But so generally, so people have it in their mind like this is like a far right Tucker Carlson
Totally.
universe kind of person.
Yeah,
Well, that's
yeah, very
amazing that
much.
then the film was able to translate, because I think now like our country's so divided and everything, and it's like
Yeah,
even movies, film, everything. That's really amazing that people from both sides could like it so much, and I think that really speaks to what an authentic movie it was, and that you weren't trying to push an agenda. You just filmed like, this is what it's like to come back from Iraq, and this is what it's like to be a veteran. And then you just let people, like, if they're on the left, they saw, look at how our society is failing and we don't have programs. And then people on the right, they'd see like, oh man, we're not taking care of our veterans and we need to, like, and that
totally.
it spoke to both sides. And I think that's super amazing. I think that was
They
really
even had
cool.
like a really super left wing guy who had seen it, who talked to me afterwards about how it
Yeah.
he was on the really radical anti-war side. He was
Yeah.
like, I just figured anybody that went off to war was like just a ruthless killer and like a mindless
Yeah.
killer. He's like, and he
Yeah.
said it made him really like confront that in himself. He's like, these are just regular
Yeah.
people in a horrible
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
Like, why did I see them that way?
Yeah.
Why didn't I? And so it did. It hit like the full spectrum. And as you know, like, you've seen it. Blood from Stone sort of does the same
Yeah.
thing, and even this new one I'm trying to get made, in terms of like people who've read the script, it's
Mhm.
almost like a ideological Rorschach test, where it's like, if
Yeah.
they're on the right, they have a certain perspective of the villains. If they're on the left, they have a
Yeah.
different perspective of the villains. I
Yeah.
love finding those ways to work across those divides,
Yeah.
and to get people, when they come out on the other side, they're unified. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, we we were squabbling over these different sides, and then when you look at it through this lens, all of a sudden it's in focus. Like, oh, we're all on the same side. Wow.
Yeah. Do you think
Um,
a lot of that came from because you grew up in Montana and then like a very conservative part of Oregon? Do you think a
yeah,
lot of that perspective came from being like an artistic liberal person in some of the
totally.
most conservative parts of the country? So you're able to, you know, you're yourself and you fit in well in New York and Los Angeles, but you're able to speak to these people who've grown up in what people in the coast call flyover country, you know,
Yeah,
and that are economically depressed and they've seen what's happened.
totally. No, that's a big part of it. Is it's too like my ability to speak to them definitely comes from having grown up around that. Even just going back to visit family, my travels. I've told you before about how I had that little hobby where I'd go join various different like weird religious cults, and so I'd go to these like middle of nowhere places and just hang out with
Yeah.
like some really unique perspectives, but like get to
Yeah.
know them. And so I've always been fascinated with that. And just like that first film I did about the censorship thing, and I've tried to keep that going throughout, is like I never wanted to be that type. I even felt that way. I don't know why. I don't know where it came from. I always felt that way. I never liked when somebody was preaching to the choir, because then it
Mm,
always felt selfish to me. It was more
mm,
about look how righteous I am, and then you have a bunch of
yeah.
adoring fans who are like, oh my god, he's so right, as opposed to like going into the lion's den and trying to convince the lions not to eat you.
Yeah.
And I would rather do that. I would rather go into the
Yeah.
lion's den and explain to them why a vegetarian diet is better. You know, and doing that sort of thing and knowing how to speak on their level or at not on their level, but in their language and to their values. And I think because, you know, as much as I may enjoy watching a Michael Moore documentary
Mhm.
or, something that speaks to my values and it makes me feel good about my views, I also know that it's not having any impact. It's
Yeah.
not changing the, people's views. Whereas with a film that you can make it in a way, I mean, that was Blood from Stone. It's framed in this almost like a sort of a patriarchal world, but it's got, with a lot of the iconography of our male, much more male led
Mhm.
society,
Yeah.
but at its heart it's actually a very feminist story of overcoming this patriarchal system to a much more homogenous system, and the whole message is about finding balance.
Yeah.
um, and so that was when having Vonnie in this guy that looks like
Mhm.
a Marvel superhero.
Do you want to just kind of rewind and tell people what Blood from
Sure.
Stone is so they can kind of get it? Because you've jumped from, just so
That's
people who
true.
don't know you, you've jumped from Frey, a depressing war veteran movie,
Yeah,
to just kind of, I mean, maybe this is a good opportunity to kind of pivot. So
totally.
so where you are, so you've made this depressing war movie that's been very successful. It's won a lot of awards. It's doing really well on Amazon. So you've validated like I can make an indie movie and it can make money. So you
Yeah.
like validated that. So now you've
So like,
left
now
doing.
how can I screw that up?
So now
Like,
you quit your commercial career in New York City. You've moved to Los Angeles. So now let's kind
yeah.
of talk about.
And I've got a film that's like doing great. It's like people are like, oh my god, this guy does amazing dramas. What's he gonna do next? I'm gonna just flush everything I've ever done down the toilet and do something that nobody knows what the hell it is. It's
You're talking
it
about Blood from Stone.
Yeah. It's when I intentionally wanted to make something just wild and different.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there's interviews with me before I made the film where
Hmm.
I was literally saying like, I don't know what it's gonna be when it's done, but I want it to be something that when people walk out of the theater, that they may love it, they may hate it, but they will not say, "Oh, I've seen that before."
You succeeded
And
at that.
I mean, there's in all the reviews, almost every critic called it a different genre. I mean, it's
Hmm.
not even just like in this genre, it's weird. It's like nobody even knows what genre it is. My distributors, like we were having discussions about what we should label it and genres until the day got finally released. We just settled on like it's a horror western romance, I guess. I don't know. But it's basically it's a story of these two vampires that have broken up and uh, one of them is trying to get away from the other, and the other one doesn't understand why she won't stay with him. And it gets into existential crises of mortality and purpose, and her trying to, she's from a small Eastern European village, and she's been a captive for 200 years, and now she's got to make her way in this modern world. And we did it in Vegas, which is just like, capitalism on steroids. And so you have this, this woman who's kind of going after the dream, but the entire dream around her is a facade of flashing lights and gambling debt. And and then Ure, the guy, he imagines himself as like this like cowboy type of dude. He's always got the cowboy hat. And he's a good old boy, and everybody loves him because he's just friendly and nice and all that, until he kills him. He's also a raging alcoholic, so he's like constantly, and because he's a vampire, like he has to get people drunk and high in order to get drunk and high, and so he'll buy rounds of drinks for a whole bar and then take them out back for some drugs, and then he'll kill them all and drink their blood so he can get wasted. And so it's a weird one. It's like it's been called a dark comedy, it's been called a neo-western, a neo-noir, it's been called a thriller, a romance, just everything. And it's, I mean, for what it's worth, it's got 100% of Rotten Tomatoes, so people seem to like it.
That's definitely a win. That's not common.
Yeah. And audience score is still above 80% too, so it's not like one of those like, oh, the critics loved it, audiences hated it. Or vice versa. It's not, it's not a Zack Snyder film. The critics all pan it and the audience all loves it. It's like, it's one of those where it's like, okay, both sides are happy. Nice.
What was the process of making it? So you went out to, because you shot this yourself too. You shot, directed it. This was like a total one-man show.
I mean, I had a great team, but in terms of like above the line, I had my buddy Michael Cardona produced it, but really, it was a smaller budget film. It was one of those things. I mean, I could get into the long stories, like trying to get bigger films made, but I had one big film that just almost got off the ground and then went down in a ball of flames. I had another one that was just in limbo forever that I was attached to. I'm just like, I'm making another small budget film.
Yeah.
While these other ones figure out what the hell they're doing. And so, I went and did that, and I wrote it, directed it. I was a cinematographer. I was also the production designer. Did all the costumes, props. Jeff Black came out. He actually moved to LA. His first day in LA, I was literally had actors over. We were like doing the fittings for fangs and makeup tests and stuff. And then I threw him out in the garage for 2 weeks to build a bunch of dead bodies. And so. It was like it was all people that I'd gotten to know through various shoots over the years. And it's like, okay, I like this person's awesome. Nika, who was a production coordinator as well as one of the main characters in it. I met her actually on the red carpet for Frey, and we remained friends. She was in the UK at the time. She moved to LA at the same time I did, just coincidentally, and like we were good friends. So I just kind of got a great group of talented people who were hard workers and all of that were kind of like my support system through it all, and just made sure things were running and could, just manage it all. But yeah, in terms of like above the line creative or whatever you want to define it as, I was writer, director, cinematographer, production designer, editor, special effects. I didn't score it. Jeff did the score.
Look at you letting other people have jobs.
I know. He did allow me to twist some knobs on a synthesizer though, so that was fun. But yeah, so it was an intense process for sure. And it was one, I mean, literally, because it was such a weird script, and my, just my expectations. You're making weird art. What's that old quote that I love? If you're afraid to be wrong, you'll never have an original idea. I love like aiming for that. It's like, okay, but also acknowledging like this could be a failure. It's like you take that risk, there's a chance to be a failure. And there was, I mean, really until it was done and I'd seen a first rough cut of it, I had no idea if it was going to work. I'm like, this could be a flaming dumpster fire for all I know. Because it's a weird movie, even just cinematically, like the visual language of it it's nothing like revolutionary. I'm not like Gaspar Noé or something like that. I'm not doing like these crazy ass shots of cameras flying through the air and stuff. But just in terms of like the visual language, there's only 4 establishing shots in the whole film. It's a very it's got a very specific language to it, and scenes are interwoven. The two main characters are only in two scenes together, bookending the film, and yet
Yeah.
their narratives are very interwoven, and there's a lot of like shots that kind of speak to each other, even though these stories initially seem unrelated. As it goes on, you realize how interconnected they are, which gets into the symbolism of like the cyclical nature of existence and yin and yang of things and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of like philosophy and ideas I was trying to say it in a visual way. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I guess it worked because people seem to pick up on a lot of that.
Yeah, man.
But it was a total experiment, and it's one of those where, as an artist, I love it career-wise. Yeah. Like, I haven't done myself any favors in terms of like being known for something. It's like, okay, I guess he can do the drama and he can do whatever the hell that is.
He do vampire neo-western.
Yeah, and my next I'm trying to make is an action thriller. So yeah. I was like, yeah, let's just do like, what genre haven't I done yet? Well, I guess I haven't done porn, but
there's still time. There's always time.
I mean, I got to get back to my roots and do an escort agency.
That would be the perfect way to bookend your career, is if your final thing is an escort ad for Craigslist. Like, that would really be the yeah. Mwah. So I feel like now we've gone through your whole career, basically. So right now you have a few projects that I know you probably can't talk a lot about, but like right now you have a few things percolating. And if you want to chat at all about that, if not, what advice would you give to someone who wanted to have a career like you?
I mean, in terms of like what I'm working on now, you're right. Like, I can't really go into a lot of detail about it for two reasons. One, because none of them are sure things. And so there's some like proprietary info. And the other one is honestly, I'm not a superstitious person, but I also just don't want to, I don't want to put it out there. And then like in a year or two, people are like, oh, that never happened. Whatever. Whatever happened to that?
You know that. You need to talk about that for a second, because a lot of people do not understand the reality of the movie business, of that things come and go, you're attached. Like, because I feel like you've been attached to 8 million different things, that there, maybe even just tell people like, look, just because the reality of the movie business, that it's not like, oh, this is going to happen, I'm going to sell my script, it's going to be amazing. Maybe you want to talk to that a little bit.
Totally. I mean, that is a really important point, is knowing that at any moment the rug can get pulled out from under you. I mean, you can have the name actors attached, you can have the funding, all this sort of stuff. And then, I mean, I had one project that just the executive producer had a meltdown, and the whole thing just went down in a ball of flames. Like, we had momentum going, and it was like a dream project for me. And the EP had a meltdown. That film still never got made. I mean, that was like 6 years ago now, 5 years ago, something like that. It never got made. I even on one of the current projects, like we thought we started like signing actors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And financier just dropped out. Just like, don't know why. Just like literally like doing contracts with some like name actors, some notable names, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we have no money. Okay, well, I guess we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Yeah, exactly. And so much of this industry, I mean, the small indie films that I have been doing, like, you don't necessarily, one, we couldn't afford anybody famous unless they were just doing us a favor. But two, it's when you start getting into like the real dollars, even somebody like Rob Eggers, the guy that Jaron DPs for so often, his last, one of his last films, they didn't get, he's done, incredibly successful, incredible films, and still couldn't get the financing for one of them until they'd already locked in like some name actors. Yeah. That's just how the industry is. I was on the phone with the production company the other day that was talking about that. Like, they've had a number of really successful projects, and they had a project that Netflix loved, but they're like, who's in it? Like, we haven't signed anybody yet. Like, well, call us back when you have a name. And then they got a name attached. It came back. It's like, hey, we have a name. Like, awesome, let's do it. It was like literally like they loved the project. They loved this production company's work. They'd done stuff with them together before, but still none of it mattered until they had a famous actor in it. And so that's a big part of it, is that side of it, and knowing that like a lot of these actors are busy, they're high demand,
Yeah.
um, and
Everyone
also
wants things from them.
everyone wants things from them. So yeah, it's like, it's often said it's like the chicken or the egg. What comes first? Like in order to sign a big actor, you need the money, but in order to get the money, you
Yeah,
need the big actor. And
exactly.
even like, we were looking at, a while back on another project, they were looking at like foreign sales on it potentially, and it's like even foreign sales, like, well, who's in it? That if you want to get product placement, if you want to, get some money from Audi to feature them in your movie or whatever, it's like, well, who's the actor? Who's going to be driving it? So it's like
We
all of
don't
it
care what the
comes.
story is. We want a
Oh,
famous face. We don't care what it's
exactly.
about. Is a famous face? Okay, good. That's all we care
Yeah,
about.
it's totally what it's all about. And so, you know, that's so much the industry. And so, really, like, no matter what you do as a director, I mean, to a certain level, I mean, there's obviously certain directors out there that can kind of have a little bit of free range now. Um, like Zack Snyder, he can do whatever the hell he wants. But if you make a studio a couple $1 billion, they're like, yeah, go have fun. Here's some play money. Go have fun.
Exactly.
For somebody like me, that's, made indie rights, low six figures or something. It's
Yeah.
not like I get a bunch of play money.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's where it's different. It comes down to, yeah, if you want to make the films, like somebody who wants to get into doing this or who's like maybe at the earlier stages or whatever, if you get anything from hearing me talk, it's just that persistence, knowing that it's going to be really rough. It's going to be a rocky road. There's going to be many times, probably throughout each day, that you question your own sanity for doing it. It's just like you were saying earlier, Todd, about like just, yeah, let's just flush away like this awesome career I have and go off to
Yeah.
LA and live, go after my dreams. But it's like if you're not willing to sacrifice all that for it, it's not going to just come to you. Like nobody's going to hand it to you. If you're not willing to take that risk on yourself, why would somebody else take a risk on you? And so it does come down to that. Like if you believe you can do it, and oddly, a bit of advice that always stayed with me. I was like, God, 10, 11 years old, and I was an idiot. I wanted to be a professional football player.
No offense, but your frame.
Yeah, exactly. And I was playing at the time. I was on like a school football team or whatever,
Mhm.
and I was loving it. I was a running back and I was a tight end and I was a cornerback. I was playing all the different positions and I was like, oh, this is amazing. I want to do this for the rest of my life. And my dad is a very practical person. And he says he doesn't remember this, but to me, this is still the best advice he ever gave me. Is he asked me, he's like, so are you the best player on your team? I'm like, no. He knew all the numbers. He's like, basically only 100 players get drafted every year into the NFL. So that means only on average 2 per state. So unless you're one of the top 2 in the state of Oregon, or you're not going to be a professional football player. I'm like, I'm not going to be a pro football player. Like that's just not going to happen. Like it just was like reality check. And he was just like, enjoy it, have fun with it, but this is not going to be your future. And it was his way of saying like, focus on school, focus on that sort of stuff. But as I got older and I really I was loving the arts and I was getting into filmmaking. Yeah. There was that time in my life and I've had to remind myself of it many times, like really reflect on it and like look honestly at the world around me and say, am I good enough? Like, am I good enough for this to be my career? Because if I'm not, why the hell would you ever try to be a filmmaker? If, it's an insane industry. Anytime you try to make sense of it, you'll just lose your mind. It's still, because it's such an expensive thing to make a film, it's still a rich man's game. I mean, I couldn't have gotten into it if I hadn't been directing, commercials, because I was able to finally just, you know, what person on a regular income can just flush 50 grand down the toilet on a film that they hope somebody cares about? Like nobody can do that with a regular income. Yeah. I got to a place where I was able to do that. Just like, here's 50 grand. I'm just going to spend it all on this thing and let's see what happens. you know, that's the only reason I got my break was because I was willing to do that. And in order to get there, I had to, you know, work my way up in the fashion and commercial world and stuff like that. So it's, you know, it's a rich man's game. And you got to know, like, not only you have to have the talent, you have to have the ability to compete against people that have a lot better toys than you do, a lot better connections than you do. And so you're already at a disadvantage. And then how many successful films are there a year? So it's like, you know, maybe like 100 profitable films a year, you know, that are like legitimately profitable. You know, even, you know, Indie Rights has a number of films and only maybe 5% of them are really profitable. Most of them, you know, maybe break even or don't even do that.
Yeah.
Not to give away all their secrets, but, you know.
That's the industry. It's tough, you know, it's like, it's barely an industry. Most movies lose money.
Totally.
And most people who do it are the children of the ultra wealthy. Like, that's like the reality. And when you don't come from that and you want to get into the movie business, at least from your, like, my takeaway is, like, if you want to go make a movie, one, teach yourself how to do everything, which you did. You literally taught yourself every aspect of filmmaking and were excellent at it. Then find a way to make enough money to save for a movie and then just go make it yourself.
Exactly.
And if it's too unrealistic to be a filmmaker, you can always become a pro football player because that's better odds.
Yeah, it actually is. Although you have a longer timeline to make it as a filmmaker. Like, if I was still trying to be a pro football player at this age, that'd be really sad. But I mean, you're totally right. And honestly, like, technology has helped a lot in terms of, like, the digital age has really democratized it to where, you know, now anybody with a camera can make a film. The downside to that is anybody with a camera can make a film. And so your competition is through the roof. You know, I mean, Sundance, I forget how many films, like tens of thousands of films get submitted to them every year. And they straight up say now that, like, if you aren't on their radar a year before the festival, like, you're not going to get in. You know, it's like, there's so much demand, or there's so many people making it now that your competition's a lot stiffer. And so there's that, but it has been democratized. Like, you can make films now. Like, you can make films with a couple of friends and it'll be cinema quality, you know, as long as you have the right gear and you know how to use it right. At the same time, you know, Frey was shot on a DSLR, and we were one of the first one of the first films picked up by the 4K streaming platform.
And you shot it on something you could get off the shelf, you know, at an electronics store. Yeah, which is crazy. So people need to get that. Is like, you can literally now go to B&H or Best Buy, buy a camera, and make a movie that can then be on the top of Amazon. Yeah,
this
literally,
camera,
like,
and this lens, like, it's the you know, the old 5D, the first one that did video, is that camera with those old Nikon lenses, a Nikon lens from the early 70s. And those are the ones, that's literally what we shot Frey on. Now, granted, I had Jaron as the DP, so he made it look phenomenal. And then Technicolor did the upres for free because they loved the film. They wanted to be part of this, their launch of this 4K stream platform. And that was Fandango, which just got bought out by Vudu, but they were the first to launch a 4K streaming platform. And they launched it with 100 films, and Frey was one of the first 100, and only 5 of them were indies, the rest were Hollywood films. And it was like literally shot on that thing.
That's so crazy.
It was wild. So yeah, it was anyone can do it now, which is great, but it's hard. I mean, like you said, learn it all, because we've all made that, you know, you've asked that person for a favor, like, oh, could you edit this for me? Could you do the sound design? Could you shoot it? Whatever. And they might say yes, but then the time comes and they're like, oh God, I actually have to do real work now. It's like asking your friends to help you move. You know, you can have 20 friends help you move.
Only I want you to move for weeks. I want you to help me move for weeks at a time. And I want you to take off from your job to help me continue to move with no payoff that you can think of, other than you really like me a lot.
And literally your only selling point to them is like, they're going to help you make your dream come true.
Yeah, exactly.
Not theirs.
Hey, can you take 3 weeks off work to help my dream
oh my
come
God.
true?
It's like, I have these ideas I want to make real. Will you work your ass off for free to help me do that? Like, it's insanity, or for low pay. I mean, um, what is it? SAG minimum is just like, it's so low, and that's like union minimum on for actors, and
And
doing
most people
that.
aren't union.
Exactly. So it's just all those different things are like, such a big part of it. And also, there's so many bad films out there. Like, you might do a casting for actors, but if you haven't made a film before, most people aren't going to apply to your film. They're not going to be that into it. Or they're going to be suspicious of you, because, like, who the hell is this person? Nobody wants to be in a bad movie, and most are bad, especially if
Yes.
they're really low budget range. Yeah, so it's like, how do you get good actors? And so that was even a learning process for me, learning the audition and process, and how to find good actors. It took me years. My early films struggled from that, short films, stuff like that, because I would do castings for weeks and weeks, and I just couldn't find good actors. Um, Part of it was also I had to improve as a director, but also a big part of it was like the good actors weren't applying. So, like, who's this? I've never heard of this guy. He's making his no budget short film. I don't want to waste my time with
Yeah.
that crap, you
Yeah.
know. And so, yeah, I'd done one with Brian. I'd done it. He'd been in a short film of mine. He was amazing in it. Still one of the best auditions I've ever seen, ever gotten to see. And I wrote Frey with him in mind, knowing I had Brian as a lead actor. And
Brian,
that
what's his last
is
name?
Kaplan.
Brian Kaplan.
Yeah, Brian Kaplan. He's phenomenal talent, and I wouldn't have had the courage to do that film without him, because I knew he could pull off that role. And it was one of the Marines that was actually at one of our screenings. He was talking to Brian afterwards, and I was just standing there listening. And he's like, man, like, every moment of that film I was watching, like, oh man, I've been there, I've lived that moment. He's like, I was like, dude, this guy must have been a Marine. This is so real. And then I saw you do push-ups. I'm like, nah, he's an actor. And
what I really take away from this, and a lot of it is like, I think what made you so different from everyone I met in New York is that you really cared about people. And it's like, even if business or something went wrong, you always took care of everyone, and you always put everyone before yourself. And even when you're killing it, you treated the smallest PA so kindly. You'd spend your time talking to him. If he wanted to talk to you about some lens or something incredibly boring to you, you'd still humor them and be incredibly kind with your time. And I think because you did that, and because you were so kind, when you asked for a favor, everyone jumped to do it. Like, I just jumped to follow you to Puerto Rico and carry your lens through the jungle. I literally.
Todd, can you hold this C-stand in the middle of a lightning storm, please? Thank you.
Yes, like I literally carried like 100-pound lens from the 40s through the jungle.
That's right.
in Puerto Rico.
I forgot you had that zoom lens with you.
Yeah, that you never used, but I carried around this incredibly heavy lens through the jungle because I'm like, Geoff's awesome, and like, he's done so much for me, and now I have an opportunity to help him on his crazy dream. Yes, I'll go to Puerto Rico with you to the jungle. Yes, I will carry this lens through a literal flood that knocks out power on the island because I believe in this guy. So I think one thing like that people can take away is that, like, being kind and a good person really does matter, especially if you want to make a movie, if you want to do anything, because, like, look, at the end of the day, it's like you can't do any of this by yourself. It's like you have to make people care about you, and they have to know you care about them, and they're going to be willing to risk it. And, like, people take off work, people will go with you to another country just so that they can support you because you put that good mojo out there.
And it's so true, both starting out and honestly all the way up to the top. Like, even talking with Jaron about it, and one of the producers I'm working with right now, who, the dude's had a number of Oscar nominee films and some of the biggest films, biggest blockbusters and stuff like that. And talking with them about it, and they're like, everyone says, like, the higher you get up, the smaller the group gets. And so, there's always the people that are notorious for being raging assholes, but realistically, like, you're not allowed to be that unless, there's always those few that are allowed to because they make a ton of money for people. But for the most part, like, and even the ones I've gotten to work with, like some of the big names I've gotten to work with are genuinely nice people, like on a shockingly genuine level, like considering like their status in this industry. And you meet them, you work with them, and like there's always that little bit of suspicion because, like you said earlier, like everybody's always like, oh, what are they after, what do they want from me, type of thing. But you start working with them and you build that rapport, and like you see like they're genuinely good people. It might be a little guarded, but genuinely good people. And it's because like you don't want that bad reputation if you're on, you know, if like Jaron doesn't like you, let's just say, he's going to talk to like Roger Deakins and all these other people over drinks and tell them about what an asshole you were. And then all of a sudden, every DP in the industry is going to know you're an asshole and that, you're an actor that doesn't respect your DPs or whatever. And vice versa. You don't want to be the DP that's rude to your actor, like what's his name with Christian Bale on Terminator. Like, you don't want to be that guy because it spreads fast and you will never work again. And so it's just in life, you should be a good person realistically, but you and I have joked about it before. We have a cutthroat system that often rewards predators and assholes.
Exactly. Yes.
So, but in this industry, it's an industry of relationships, and unless you have access to ungodly amounts of money, or have just a talent that brings in billions of dollars a year for major studios, like, you better be a really good person. Otherwise, people won't want to work with you. That's just what it comes down to. And getting up off the ground, I don't think it was me being, necessarily being nice as much as I was just so grateful for anyone that was willing to help me out. It's just like, the fact that you were willing to go to Puerto Rico for me, or that you were willing to go and like shoot my festival show, or, do that type of stuff. Cause like, I'm like this, I'm not giving you like the most glamorous jobs. Like, you're doing the grunt work. And like the fact that you were willing to do that and had such a great spirit about it and stuff like that, like, I was grateful to have you there. And to have somebody competent also, like, that's a rarity. So if you get somebody competent around you, they're gold. Like, treat them like gods, because they are worth more than anything else. So all that, I think, is just important lessons to have going forward, and all the way up to the top. Because if you piss people off, and I've seen this happen, as you start to fall, there's no one to catch you.
Yes. 100%. Now, I think this has been really great. I think for someone who looks up to you and wants to have a career, I think there's just so much knowledge, and I'll just kind of summarize it by one. There's no excuses. If you want to make a movie, if you want to do arts, teach yourself how to do it. You can do it. You may not be as talented as Geoff, but at least you'll be able to do something. The tools are out there with the computer and cheap equipment you can get at Best Buy. You can start making really good stuff. Be nice to everyone, and then really just go for it. And if you have a dream, like, it doesn't come free. You have to give up things, because the people you're competing with, they're willing to give up things. So you have to give up stuff. And if you do that, maybe you'll be like Geoff, and you're going to be able to make movies that really move people. And also, it's like, if you don't have the equipment, don't let it stop you, because if you have a great story, like, you can make a movie that could change people's lives and change how they think about things. So, there's no reason, just go for it.
Totally. I only have one last thing to add to it, and I'll be brief about it. But another thing that is so important is, if you're going after that dream, if you're risking it all, do what you want to do, what you believe in. Because if you risk it all to do what you think is popular, or what you think people are going to want, one, you're always going to be 10 steps behind people who are already doing that. The trends will change by the time you finish your film. But at the same time, you'll also you'll never reach that level you want to reach, because what's going to make you unique as an artist is your voice and your unique perspective. I have a certain perspective. If I tried to make a Rob Eggers film, or if I tried to make a Michael Bay film, I would fail miserably, because I'm not them. I could mimic their style, I could mimic their vibe and all that sort of stuff, but I would never reach the level they're at, because I'm not them. So, if you go after what somebody else is already doing, you're going to be behind them. Do your thing, do it the best you can, And if you like it, there's going to be somebody else out there that does too.
That's awesome. I think that's perfect. Thank you so much for coming on and
Yeah.
doing this. So if people want to look you up, is it just sporkproductions.com? Spork, like the spoon in
Yeah.
between a knife and a
Yes.
fork.
Yep.
Is
Half
there
spoon, half
anything
fork.
else you want to plug while you're here? If people
mean,
have made it
honest-
all 2 hours into the
if you've
very end
made
of
it
the
this
podcast.
long, oh my God, this is a long one. Sorry. I ramble.
No, it was great. It was really good.
Honestly, I'd love you to check out the 2 movies I have done and let me know your thoughts on them. Seriously, whether it's through email, social media, or just leaving a hateful review on Amazon or whatever. Like, go for it.
They're both streaming on Amazon. Frey and Blood from Stone. They're both currently on Amazon. Is that where people can check them out?
Yeah, they're on Amazon. If you don't have an Amazon account for any reason, it's free actually on Tubi and Roku. But it's with ads. So, whereas you can watch it without ads on Amazon.
So there's no excuse to not watch it.
Yeah, and it's on Amazon
They
Prime.
can see ads you made on your movie.
Exactly. But it's on Amazon Prime. So if you have a Prime membership, it's free there. And they're on a bunch of others. I really need to get an updated list and update the website. I haven't done that because I'm an idiot.
COVID.
And
COVID.
just I had this other film that's like underway, so I got derailed. And again, I also built
excuse.
And I built
Making
my own websites.
A movie is the reason.
Yeah.
Because of course you also do web design.
Exactly. And I haven't updated the websites because I'm busy trying to make movies. But yeah, go to like bloodfromstonemovie.com or fraymovie.com. You can see all the links to where they're available at and stuff like that. And yeah, just let me know what you think. Honestly, I love to hear thoughts, whether you hate it, love it. I like to hear it. And there's nothing you can say that's worse than what my own voice is telling me. So don't be harsh.
Well, you shouldn't have me advice about yourself because you're an incredible guy, Geoff. And thank you so much for coming on.
It's great talking to you. Great to see you. Thanks for having me.